Most new diesel cars nowadays require filling with Adblue, so in this video I explain what it is and why it's needed. Adblue is the commercial name for synthetic urea or diesel emission fluid. Synthetic urea, and hence Adblue, is essentially an ammonia-based solution diluted in water and is used to treat exhaust emissions from diesel vehicles. But why is it needed? Now, when petrol or diesel is combusted in an engine, it combusts with the nitrogen in the air to produce NOx emissions. NOx is the name given to oxides of nitrogen, mainly nitric oxide, NO, and nitrogen dioxide, NO2. These are toxic gases that are harmful to human health. Since the 90s, NOx emissions have been regulated under the Euro emission standards. This started with Euro 1. As the Euro standard improved, the limit and requirements for NOx emissions became tighter. Diesel vehicles produce higher NOx emissions than petrol, so by Euro 5, vehicle manufacturers were looking at extra technologies to meet the limits. One such technology is Selective Catalytic Reduction, or SCR, which uses Adblue to treat those emissions. SCR was first introduced on larger diesel engine vehicles, with Mercedes the first brand to introduce this technology in Europe on the E-Class back in 2007. By Euro 6, the limits were much stricter, and Adblue was more widespread, with most Euro 6 diesel vehicles either introducing Selective Catalytic Reduction or consuming more Adblue if the system was already in place. There were also smaller stages within the Euro emission standards, such as Euro 6 B, C, D and D, which may have also required changes, such as using more Adblue injection. But how does Adblue and SCR actually work in the car? So, on a modern diesel engine, you have the exhaust system, which features something called aftertreatment, essentially parts of the exhaust that are designed to clean up the emissions coming out the engine. Firstly, you tend to have a diesel oxidizing catalyst, or the DOC, which treats emissions like particulate matter and carbon monoxide. Then a DPF, which is a diesel particulate filter designed to capture particles of unburnt fuel and carbon. And lastly, the Selective Catalytic Reduction filter, which is where Adblue comes in, primarily targeting NOx emissions. Some vehicles may have a lean NOx trap known as LNT in addition or in place of the SCR to treat NOx emissions. So the way SCR works is that Adblue is stored on the vehicle in a specific tank and then injected into the exhaust ahead of the SCR filter. This is where the chemical reaction occurs with the intended emissions. Now let's do a little bit of chemistry. NOx emissions, which is primarily nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide, as I mentioned earlier, come down the exhaust system and react with the primary active component of Adblue, which is ammonia. As a result of this reaction, nitrogen and water vapour are produced, which are two harmless gases that are key components of ambient air. The process is not 100% effective, but it significantly reduces the amount of NOx emissions leaving the tailpipe. There are some other byproducts as a result of Adblue usage, like additional CO2, as there is a carbon component in the Adblue solution. How often does it need to be refilled? For many older models with Adblue, they may only need refilling at the recommended service interval. In that case, the garage would refill it as part of the service. However, with later emission standards on more modern diesel cars, particularly under real-world driving emission requirements introduced during Euro 6C, more Adblue is needed to control emissions, and hence you may need to refill yourself and more frequently. You could expect your Adblue to be topped up regardless as part of your routine service at a garage. So if you do need to refill it yourself, how do you refill it? First, you need to know where to refill it. Some earlier Adblue vehicles may have a fill point under the bonnet, like the early Range Rover Evokes, or in the boot, like some earlier Jaguar XEs. But primarily on nearly all modern diesel vehicles, you will find it in the fuel flap next to the fuel fill cap. You can identify the Adblue fill point by the smaller blue cap, which will be typically labelled with Adblue or diesel emission fluid, DEF. There are a few ways to refill your car of Adblue. You can get small handheld bottles that are directly attached to the fill port, which is good for top-ups. Bigger bottles with nozzles are another way to get more Adblue in at a time, or for multiple fills, but most conveniently and probably the quickest is to refill using a pump, as you would do for fuel itself. However, although these might be common for trucks in the UK and for cars in the EU, these sort of pumps are not so widely available in the UK for use on cars and vans. It could be the most affordable way to refill, as well as using less plastic. A garage might likely use a mobile refill pump. We've talked about refilling, but what if you don't? Legally, vehicle manufacturers have to prevent vehicles from running without Adblue if the vehicle has the Adblue system fitted. So if you're getting low on Adblue, your vehicle will alert you, likely with a mileage countdown to when the engine won't start. Typically, this alert will be very generous, giving you a long period of time or distance to refill, Eventually though, the vehicle will not start until the Adblue is refilled. But can you get around having to refill your car? Well, yes, but not legally. This would be considered tampering of the emission control systems, and I should make clear I do not endorse this. But there are things available and advertised on the market that are called emulators. This is an electronic device which bypasses the SCR control system and makes the vehicle think it is injecting Adblue when the engine ECU has requested it. So then you never actually consume Adblue, and so you never have to refill. The main driver of this, of course, is to save cost and inconvenience by the fact that you don't have to refill the car with Adblue. So there you go, Adblue and SCR, a highly effective technology that reduces harmful pollutants from diesel vehicles, which improves air quality for all. I hope you found this video useful and interesting.